up, everyone? Good evening. Good evening. My computer's being a little slow today. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to Discussions of America. Tonight is just Jay. But of course, as usual, we're always here to give you truth, knowledge, clarity, and a safe haven, and inform you of what has happened in the past, and of course, what's going on in the present. So, thank you for joining us. Tonight, we do have a special guest with us, Kendell M Simmons, a part of the Delco Resists organization. So, I'm pretty excited to speak with him tonight. Pretty much about whatever is on his mind. I do have some questions for him though. So stay tuned for that. He will be with us momentarily. What's up? What's up? What's up, y'all? How you doing, Candy? How you doing, Mike? It's good to see y'all. All right. So last night it was some hard some hard topics that we talked about surrounding the documentary The 13th. And it was it was a lot of information, kind of very thick stuff. So tonight is a bit of a contrast to that. Obviously, we try to keep it a little balanced as much as possible, even though we go through so much and we've been completely stressed. All of us can agree that 2020 has stressed us all out. We can or should be able to pick something out of that was good, or that you feel like you grew in some ways this year. I think that's important. I think that is very important. All right, so without further ado, I'm gonna introduce y'all to a buddy of mine. His name's Kendell M Simmons. I think he is just about ready. All right. All right. Can you hear me?
Oh, there we go. Yeah, I just had to fix my mic. I had it turned off.
All right. So how you doing, man?
Today was a good day. I tried to detangle my hair, decided halfway through that was not happening until I get the appropriate comb.
Even dude, that's always a struggle for me.
Oh yeah.
And you have like tons of hair. I don't know how you do it. Do you have like a whole regimen?
I swear I had at least 3 pounds of hair come off in the shower about an hour and a half ago. 3 pounds.
I remember those days. I cut my hair like twice within the past 2 years. So like I'm basically just still starting out all over again. And being how busy I am, and just up and down with emotions, I really haven't had the time to even worry about my hair. Hence the hat.
Oh yeah, I feel that.
But yeah, no, obviously I was just saying to everyone like how stressful these times have been, given like, you know, I don't even know what to call this election thing. Because
current
it's
event.
still
just squeeze everything under current events and leave it as that.
Right. Just the whole year in general. I mean, you could start from COVID to now, and it's like I'm surprised some of us haven't died from exhaustion or like just simple stress, you know, because the whole year, and not even just our nation, but the world, because the world is connected to us in so many ways, has been holding their breath, you know. So I just wanted to touch base with you on that and see how you're doing specifically.
I've been tired. I deal with mental health issues a lot. I think this year is strange because it's been both my best and worst year by far. As far as what's happened and like what's gone on, as far as getting involved with activism, keeping up with COVID numbers and statistics. I work taking phone calls for funeral homes now. So there's a lot going on that's heavy. But at the same time, all of this has provided me with the opportunity to delve into communities that I never would have experienced before. I'm more proud to like identify as a Black person than I ever was. And that's because like there are white allies that have come out, and now there are so many people uplifting us and making it okay to be who you are regardless of that. And that doesn't even just go for Black people. It's anybody that would be under attack by exclusion or hatred, anything like that. That's all going out the window because we're learning how to work with each other.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I think everything you said I agree with, especially the fact that even though we've all been through hard things this year, that's one thing that all of us can relate to and bring us together if we actually like are taking mind to the things that are making us cross paths, whether it be a disagreeable situation. There's something to be taken away from that, that you can take away from that and learn from. And going back to mental health, like we did an episode the other day about mental health, specifically in communities of people of color and poor communities, especially because it ties into poverty, and class ties into race when it comes to America. I can relate when it comes to dealing with mental health issues. And you said you've had a good day. My day was just a bit like ups and downs. I'm not gonna lie. I have people in my family that I'm very close with that have just been told that they have COVID, and they're at high risk for it. And so I'm it's a bittersweet thing because there's so many people that have survived this and are just okay, and are still living. There's people who have got it multiple times and are okay. But then there are people who have died. And so I don't know how to react to it, So it's like a up and down. But today, I mean, I've been looking forward to this discussion for a week now. So for me personally, this is the highlight of my day. So I just want to say it's good to hear that you're doing okay today.
Awesome. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's every day it takes a while for me to like get up just because like registering today is another day in 2020 and then 2021's around the corner. It's not suddenly going to be better, but when you don't even have the energy to think like what can I do to make today better, it's like it's difficult. But I mean, even if you can't take a shower, change your clothes, go wash your hands, like make sure to brush your teeth, like all those things, like I have to go back to the basics some days in order just to stay awake, let alone get back out into doing whatever we're doing when we're doing it, having the conversations we need to have, going back to the basics and really lifting up that foundation. So even if today was a bad day, you still made your bed or you still put your clothes away. You always have that.
I completely agree. It starts with the small things. It starts with just doing something. Like my go-to is if my mind tells me to not do something or to sleep or to not care, I immediately do my best to do the opposite of that. To try and like shock myself out of that, because I know, like, I call my depression Berlinda. And so I know I'll be like, oh, that's just Berlinda whispering in my ear, like, let me push that bitch to the side, That's like my personal way of dealing with it. But I think that it's the same thing at what you're saying. Like everyone has, yes, Megan just said, even the little acts of self-care can have a huge impact. It helps keep your sanity. And I think that's exactly what we're saying here. It's so brushing your teeth every day is sign of good mental health, from a fellow occupier. Haley says you are both cherished and valued.
Oh, we love to see it. We love seeing
Yes,
all the friends.
yes. There's so many comments here. Lisa says, "Thank you, all the young activists like Kendell and Jontel for keeping us white moms on our toes. PA proud." And that's another thing. Like I'm PA proud. I'm not gonna lie. I'm not ashamed of it. Every region, every state, every commonwealth specifically has their own challenges. We as Americans have our own challenges. Doesn't matter what demographic you're from. But I wanted to ask you specifically, being a member of Delco Resists, what is it that you guys do? What is it? What is it that your aim is specifically in your region, pertaining to the unique issues that you all face down there?
So with everything we've been doing with like the marches and everything, there, of course, activism is not seasonal.
Right.
But with the colder months coming right around the corner, I don't know what last week was, 70 degrees in November. Couldn't have guessed it. But
Right.
with the holidays coming up, I think there's going to be a much bigger push for things like food drives. I want to do like a Delaware County, like a holiday card exchange just to check in, because again, as things get colder, the days are shorter. The more important thing even than activism becomes being sure our people can be active when the sun comes up again.
Yes.
So being sure families are fed, like I said, running those food drives, just giving people reminders that everybody involved does still matter, even when it's cold out and we can't see each other as often. As far as my involvement with it, that's what's going on. There's more stuff working behind the scenes, conversations that the girls, Ashley and Carol, are having. Wonderful women. I love those two. The rest of the team at Delco Resists, we've really been laying low. We hit the Chester March last week. The one before that as well was about 2 weeks ago. Those are both beautiful events that reminded a Black community that this is for us, this is for them, this is for Black cities, and even like Mexican American people that come up here and they vibe in our communities too. The entirety of the Latinx community, they're involved in BLM too. They matter too. Delco Resist is a Black Lives Matter organization in a way, but it's a lot bigger than that. It's about being sure everybody in Delaware County and eventually elsewhere has a decent, like dignified standard of living that we can all stand on at some point.
Yes. Yes. Completely resonates with me. I didn't even start off. I was so nervous. Could you just tell me a little about yourself for everyone? Your age, your pronouns, where you reside.
Oh, so I'm 23, which I still haven't gotten over saying. I swear I'm still stuck in the mentality where it's like adulting is real. There's a point where you are no longer a dependent and you are expected to be independent and capable on your own. And the world is scary. That can be harder than it feels sometimes.
Yes.
So I'm 23. I live in Delaware County. I live in Fallcroft myself. I've already been doxxed, so I shouldn't even be worried about that. But I wasn't politically active aside from like having social media conversations until this year. I would talk all the crap in the world on social media before, but I wasn't actually involved in any activism. I don't think I even spoke with activists. I just kind of like posted things that either meant something or didn't mean anything. But it's been nice to be able to get involved with people like Delco Resists and weaponizing that in a positive way and making it so my voice can be an instrument for change that matters.
I agree. It's so nice to be able to this whole year, that's the one really good thing, and we touched on it before, was just the uniqueness of how this year has brought all of us together through these unique circumstances. Like the circumstances that brought you and I together initially were pleasant, and then it was was a learning experience. I would say not a bad experience, but definitely a learning experience that I said we can definitely learn from. But amongst that, I gained a lifetime friends in some capacity. Like you and especially Carol are two people that I've had the pleasure of seeing grow just the same as I, and continue to be passionate and continue to fight for our people with poise and with generosity and with a certain unbiased candor that really speaks to your humility. And it's definitely something to say about an individual, because there are a
Probably
lot of
froze for a
people.
minute.
I froze.
Okay. Oh no, we're good. I think it might have been on my end. I'm not sure. Go ahead.
It's something to be said because there are a lot of people who get into this world. I can say that I didn't know what I was doing. I still don't. I just know I'm trying to follow my heart and do what I can to speak for people who can't speak, or make people proud, and kind of lift our people up in whatever way I can, whatever that is for me. And seeing someone else do that in the way that is for them continues to inspire me. And so this is why I like to have discussions such as this. It's extremely I love having conversations with someone that is just as passionate, probably if not more, about small things, but large things as well. And I cherish conversations such as this, especially with another young Black man. I actually didn't know you were 23. I thought you were like 27. I'm not gonna lie.
No, I'm a baby. Whether or not I like it, I'm still a baby, and I'm gonna embrace that for a couple more years.
No, that's awesome, because like literally you're wise beyond your years. I will say that. Excuse me. And I'm glad to have the pleasure of knowing you, despite the way that we've all met, and not even just you and I, but the circumstances that I've met so many other young powerful people. I wouldn't even say just activists, but young powerful people that started out like us, just being outspoken online. It's nice to see paths cross and people start to blossom.
Oh, absolutely. You use the word blossom there, which I don't think you can't replace it with a more perfect word. 2020 has been a year where more than ever people know who they are now.
Yes.
In any community, in the LGBTQ community, if you identify there, you now have like swaths of people that are willing to stand at your back. If you're a person of color, there's an infinite number of people who are going to stand with you against racism, against whatever small scale issues would bother you, whether that's somebody screaming something rude at you down the street or messing up a court case. Now you have people that are going to use their voices to lift you. And I don't think there has been a better year in recent years for me or a lot of people like me as far as figuring out who we are and what we're supposed to do, especially now.
Yeah, Victoria hits that on a nail. She says we gain family.
Yep.
And I mean, I see all of us, the human race, as family. Some of us more extended family than others, but I see us all as family. And I feel like this year was definitely a moment that brought us a little closer to our family that we may not have known otherwise if the events for this year had not happened. So I completely agree with you on that, brother. Completely agree with you on that. The other was not the other day, but like last week, with Walter Wallace being executed in Philadelphia, and the protest that ensued after. People can say what they want about what was on TV, but actually being there amongst it was a lot of peaceful, powerful protests. And I happened to see you at Malcolm X Park.
Yep.
I was literally like all over the place and just like tired and thrown off, but I couldn't not be there. And so like I was not in the mood to engage. And then after we split off, I was like, I wonder what he's going to do. Like, I wonder what his plans are. So I'm actually asking How did the rest of the day go for you? Did you stay at that event, or did you go off and like hang around the city? How
No,
was the
so we had actually met up with a few of my other friends there that we hadn't seen in a while, not since the protesting all started in June. We hadn't seen the friend that we hung out with since June 1st. So we ran into her there, and then we just spent some time talking with them, discussing like their involvement because they live just over the bridge in Jersey. So we were
Okay.
hanging out with them, having it was a restorative day. It was Halloween, so after being at the protest and the march earlier in the day, we figured we'd wind down for the rest of the night. We got together with some of the people from the Delco Resists team and just took care of ourselves in the presence of each other, which is, I think, something that we all need to keep doing.
Yes. I think it's extremely important. Like the two women that were standing at the pulpit and recited Asata Shakur. I had the pleasure of seeing them again at another demonstration last week. And they do a really good job of having that feeling of that camaraderie and that passion. That for me personally, I can say definitely like re-energized me. And I'm glad that you were able to connect with people and probably use the same kind of energy that I'm sure I had to share with your friends as well. Were they people that you've actually like been in touch with, or you just actually haven't seen?
We've spoken a few times, but we hadn't actually met in person or seen each other since June. So this was, I think it was the first protest that she actually got to attend in quite a while as well, just because she had a lot of home stuff and family things to deal with. So she wasn't super active as far as keeping up with us, but she did come out on Halloween for that protest for the Walter Wallace event, and it's just good to see people again. That goes for seeing random people that people that fit in the random box like 6 months ago that just pop up at protests now, and it's just like, oh hey, how are you? Like,
Yeah.
how have you actually been? Like that, it's a magic thing to look around and see like people from my social media now in person, at different events, seeing like being recognized at 7-Eleven was crazy. I walked in there a few nights ago, and the lady was like, look, you guys did it. Like, we won. You are making changes. And this was just a lady at 7-Eleven. So I walked in and I'm just like, wow, like it doesn't feel like we had anything to do with it, but at the same time, it feels like we individually have everything to do with it.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. There was a councilman from here in Lancaster that I had spoke with a few months, actually like a month and a half, 2 months ago. And they mentioned, back in the early civil rights era in the 50s and 60s, they did a lot of things day in and day out. And over the course of a 10 to 15 year period, they did affect change. Think about this year alone and how much change we've affected. It actually does, it makes you sit back and think, not only just us specifically, but every single one of us holds power. And this year has shown that, dude. Like, this year has totally shown that. Nicole, I didn't get to go to the Harrisburg event, and I was just going through stuff, and I'm so happy that Nicole got to go, and I was so stoked that you went, and I was upset I didn't get to see either one of you. So like, I'm proud that Nicole got to see you, and she said she saw you. So people definitely like feel you and they look up to you, bro.
I didn't recognize her initially until she had spoken at the podium, and then I was just like, oh hey, yeah, she's. I don't know if I had her added prior to that, but I had seen her around in a few comment sections. Yeah. But again, like, that's the thing about all this; it's like full of serendipity. You just meet people that you never would have thought to meet. You have conversations you never thought you were going to have. You do stuff you never thought you were going to do. If you had told me 5 years ago that I was going to be screaming in the streets at people. I
Right.
might have maybe predicted it, but for different reasons. Like
Not me.
it would have just been, things would be much different if they weren't as bad as they were. But because they're as bad as they are, there's a lot of potential for them to be better than they are.
Right.
Right. I like to say that we horribly overestimate what we can do in 1 year, and we underestimate what we can do in 10. And those things together, like this being my first year, you said it was like your first year being like active as well. It's unbelievable to think of the growth that can occur after only 1 year, let alone giving us another 9.
Exactly. And that's why I keep urging people, and it's not a negative thing, but I try to stress, like, Trump may be on the way out, but this is where the real work begins, and it's not anything to be negative about or be fearful of, because look at the changes that we've stirred up this year, this summer alone. We've gotten the presidents, one of the, president elect now, I guess you would call them, talking about the issues that we've been picking a bone with government about all year in our local governments. So that is huge. So yes, you're right. Imagine all the change that we can make 5, 10 lasting impacts years down the road from now if we keep up the momentum. So yeah, this is definitely the time to like double down, triple down, and also spread more, network more. I love that you said earlier that you guys are taking the time to there is no off season of activism, and there definitely is not. I've changed my gears a little bit to do different things, but I'm still making sure that I'm doing something. Mm-hmm. And I think that's important, and I commend you for that as well. I think that people think just because you don't see as many people out on the streets, or just because it's getting colder, that these topics cannot be talked about. And I think this is the perfect time to double down and talk about them. We have social media, we have forums, Zoom, and everything else. So it's the perfect time to utilize those services.
People say all the time, don't bring politics to the dinner table. But I think that mentality is one of the biggest reasons we don't have an understanding of what politics really is. Politics it's not something that's irritating to deal with once every 4 years. Politics is how much people are getting paid. It's how much people have to pay when they get sick. Politics is how much people need to pay to live in a home or have electricity. Politics is how close we are to a climate crisis that will doom the planet. Like, politics isn't something that we can just brush off and say like, oh, well, we voted, so politics is done. No, it's not bad to be political. What's bad about getting political is when you let your greed, selfishness, and your arrogance take over and control what should be compassionate and kindness and prosperity for everybody. But it becomes the situation that we've seen where the wealthy pull everything for themselves. And that's what I don't get about the people we consider opposition, because we're not like, they're not going to be hurt by the things we want to do. No one's going to be hurt by getting universal health care. That's not going to happen. Or affordable, cheaper housing for everybody. No one's going to be hurt by that. But there's just this belief that the left is a boogeyman that's coming to take your guns and ruin your life. Like, that's the most tiring part, I think.
Oh yes, it's part of those fearful tactics. At this point, I do think that there's a sector of government that has all these tactics that are so old, and we've gotten so used to them. I think now is that time. We have the numbers. There may be a 30% that are extreme Trumpists, but for the most part, most of America has enough common sense if we sit back and really utilize the tools that we do have. We've shown that, voting aside, I'm not, there's a lot of things that come in with technicalities. We got the Supreme Court, we've got the electoral voting system, all of that. I personally feel needs to be worked out at some point, but the foremost thing is the symbolism of voting. how we've had this record turnout in history shows that we can come together and make changes. And albeit this was propelled by a general distaste and trying to save our democracy, but there are many other things that are just as important that are becoming politicized when, as you stated, they shouldn't be, yet we're still being kept from getting those same issues resolved.
Mm-hmm.
It's just this circle of like, we have to find a way to move out of that ball, that circle that they keep throwing us in. And personally, I'm confused on how to do that. So like, what's your take on that and what's your advice?
So I think of politics as, if you think of a board game or a video game or any kind of game, every game has rules.
Right.
You roll the dice, you move as many times as you roll the dice. Politics are your rules for real life. The people writing policy are the ones saying, if you roll a dice and you hit 10, you actually move 20 because you got lucky. Now you move double. We need to make a system or just encourage the system to change in a direction where every time somebody rolls the dice, their answer or the response they get from the country or the universe isn't work harder or you're screwed. It should be, we're here for you to take care of you because you were born into our society. That alone, it should be a privilege. But if you're born into crappy conditions, and like foster children, like people don't talk about how horrible like foster children have it. And often you get these like nightmarish stories, and because you're born into a life where you lose your parents.
Thank you for bringing that up.
Absolutely, you shouldn't have
gotta tune in on Monday because you remember Brittany Nadeau?
Yes.
She grew up in the foster care system and then was adopted, but by a white family and Trump supporters. But I wanted to just point out that I never really thought too much about people growing up in foster care.
No one does.
And exactly. And she opened up my world to that. And so Monday we will be talking about that. It's something that is extremely swept under the rug. And I'm sorry to cut you off by that.
Oh, no, you're good.
Good.
It's the same thing for like the transgender community. Like there are entire circles of people that don't understand transgenderism and that it's not something to be afraid of or paranoid about. They're like, transgender people aren't going into your bathroom to kidnap your children. Like that's not happening. As Teddy just said, like people don't talk about the marginalized. And my belief is that that is the role of your president, your local government. It's to speak for the people who are at risk of losing their voices. And whatever capacity that may be, that shouldn't be allowed to happen. People should always matter.
Being that this is America and we're supposed to be the forthright nation, I get that we've regressed 4 years due to some things. Do you think after this whole murky transition of power and we have Biden and Harris, do you think it will at least be easier to work on reestablishing some sort of new progressiveness to reestablish us as the forthright nation? Being that we do have all these issues that we need to work on, it's just a matter of like presenting it to the world. I think the world is waiting for us.
I don't even want to be the best nation. I just want to be a better nation than we are today. Honestly, I don't like nationalism scares me more than the idea of like socialism ever did. When your mentality is everyone inside of this bubble is good, everybody outside that bubble is like bad or worse for one way or another, whether it's they're in a shithole country, quote the president, or they're just not doing as well in like education or something. America is like losing in like anything that we would have been winning anytime between the 40s and the 80s. We're not a country that was ever great for everyone who has lived here. America has always had like brilliant aspirations and wonderful idolization of what it wants to be, but every single stopper that's been in the way has been some politician standing in the way of real progressive change. So I do think that we have the potential to make the changes we need to see, just because we understand that politicians aren't godlike figures that you can't speak to. They're a local representative who lives 3 blocks away from you. They have a voice in Congress or in the Senate, and they'll use their voice to lift you up if you reach out, develop those basic relationships, and build from there. And that's what we're doing now. Is we know that we need to build, and we finally have enough unity and enough of a team to be able to do it.
I agree. That can't be more pertinent to the current climate in America right now, with the murky transition of power that we're seeing play out. And that's what I want to touch on too. I personally don't think that Trump's going to concede,
Not at all.
given how stubborn and whatever he is. He doesn't necessarily have to. He doesn't have to. But given the national security risks by him holding up actual transfer, I know that, you know, when 9/11 happened, they had a hard time properly doing things because the transfer of power was a little lagging, given Al v. Gore, but Gore versus Bush. But this is different. We're dealing with a psychopath. I see this personally as an opportunity for a reconstruction, but that doesn't come without some kind of major disagreement. So my thoughts to you are, how do you see from now to January 20th playing out? What are your what's your theory of a scenario?
So my mentality for this for a while has been to stop even legitimizing the idea that Trump will be allowed to hold on to power, right? Like when he's on the debate stage and like Chris Wallace asks him, are you going to foster a peaceful transition of power? That shouldn't be a question. Why are you asking that? The answer is yes. He's going to give up the power peacefully, or he's just not going to like the results. And then like hearing news broadcasters talking about the potential for him to just hold on to power, there's a big hole in the logic, because doing that puts him in a position where he's been legitimized enough to delegitimize everything else. And if you don't do that, you don't legitimize a brat who trying to hold on to his last straws of power before he loses everything, he's going to fall through all by himself. But yes, even like hating Trump excessively, that polarizes more people against you. And I can't stand the man, but if we don't allow ourselves to let him scream and cry and complain to himself, and we keep responding to it and uplifting it and giving him a voice, that we're going to face more consequences than we want to. So I think if we manage to let go of the idea that he can do it in any legitimate way, it'll go away over time, because the systems are going to work the way they're going to work. We have enough people doing the work to make sure they function properly, as long as we keep pushing for them to function properly. That is letting the courts strike down his attempts at lawsuits.
Which they have been overwhelmingly.
Yeah, it just keeps happening. So the idea like, oh, well, he's just going to ignite his base. He's going to ignite his supporters and hold on to power like de facto. If that's the case, then we have to deal with it. But we don't want to legitimize that idea before he gets there.
Right. I completely agree with that. And it's the bone that I have to pick with mainstream media and how they enable it, because it's totally like enabling a little child whiny brat, as the comments are saying here, you know. And obviously we've dealt with this since the beginning, but now it's because he's losing, we're seeing more of it. And you're right, this is the time where we should double down on not enabling it. What do you say to the Republicans that are falling in line with him and enabling it, probably more so than anyone else? Like,
I don't know if I even have words for them. Uh, the thing about it is that you don't want to waste your breath on people who aren't listening, right? And at this point, we're so deep in the Trump hole. Imagine like arguing with people over like Hitler being a bad person. Like people say like, oh well, Donald Trump hasn't killed millions of people. Well, we already have 250,000 dead due to negligence about COVID. What happens if in another 4 years where he's not vying for re-election and he has absolute power without needing to cater to people? What happens then? That's that's the picture that they need to see, and it's the one that they're not seeing.
Right. I agree. I agree. And I agree with Mike, exactly what you said. Hmm. It's interesting. For me personally, I'm having a really hard time. And maybe this comes from just being thrown into the world of joining in the world of activism, but I I have a hard time trusting anyone that's not involved.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay, so I'm not the only person.
Oh, you are not alone. Um, I had to recently block a friend because I didn't block her. I found that she blocked me. And it was likely because she would comment and say things like, well, I'm not going to pin everything on cops because there are good ones. And it's like, well, the problem is that even a good cop is going to pull a homeless person off a bench or pull them out of a dumpster. Like, that's the thing, is that you can have good people who are cops, but what it means to be a cop right now isn't a good thing. It's not. You have this level of power and immunity to you that allows you to project your power however you feel with no fear of repercussions. And to do your job, half the time you're hurting people who don't need to be hurt. You're taking something away from someone who doesn't need. Like, why does a drug addict need to spend time in prison? What is that doing for anybody? What you see a mom like shoplifting baby food because she can't afford it. Like, what does throwing her in prison do? Whose life is that making better? It's not making her kid's life better. It's not making the co-partner's like life better. None of that is improving anybody's life. So the idea of policing is extracting money from the population and extracting labor from the population with no risk of repercussion because it's a government agency, one way or another. So the entirety of the system is built on skeletons, and the people who aren't involved in activism don't seem to get that. So they'll say things like, well, yeah, not all cops are bad. Like, no, not all cops are bad people, but being a cop it's a bad thing until we can rework the way the system works.
I find that I get so mentally drained from having these kinds of conversations with people, particularly like friends, but family members too. But family members, they're not racist, but they're also just as indoctrinated as racists. A lot of black folks.
Yeah, I consider that still racist.
Exactly. Right. Right. And so it makes it right there. It makes it hard for me to be as blunt and forthcoming than I would be with just a friend. And so when it comes to family, I tend to like internalize my vents. Whereas with friends, I say my things, I say my grief, and then I just separate. And I don't want it to be that way, but I feel like I have to have the same outlook as I have had with all these racists, these Trumper racists that don't want to they don't want their minds changed. They know exactly how they want to feel. And a lot of times they just provoke and just taunt. And so it's just a waste of energy when you're trying to go back and forth. And I kind of feel like I'm doing the same thing when it comes to family and friends now. Like, do you feel the same way? Do you agree? And if so, how do you deal?
So I've been reading some Ibram X Kendi. So I've come to the idea where it's like, if behavior is not anti-racist, it's racist or capable of having racist effects. If you have a policy that serves to uplift racial equity, you have an anti-racist policy. If you have a policy that doesn't do damage to racial equity, but puts a stopper on some level of it, you have a racist policy because it's not actively standing against racism. You can be racist, not racist, and anti-racist. Not racist is closer to racist than anti-racist. I notice it in myself. Like when I'm working, again, I'm taking phone calls like all day. If I get someone like from the Latinx community and they have like 4 names and I don't hear it properly, I'll get like frustrated and think like, dang. And it's like, oh man, you're actually getting upset over the fact that someone has a handful of names that are harder to hear or harder to spell. That is in a way, it's a racist activity. Doesn't make me a racist person. Right. Because I recognize and want to change the behavior that I have when I react to it.
Exactly.
So calling somebody racist it's not calling them a mean name. It's not calling them an asshole. It's saying that you are exhibiting racist behavior that is going to hurt somebody if you don't stop.
It's just acknowledging the fact that we all grew up in a white supremacist raised. It's ingrained in our society. So to not acknowledge that is to not acknowledge that we all have biases.
Yeah.
We all have biases. And that's something that's commendable, but it shouldn't be. You know, like that should just be something that's expected, but it's not. I can't wait for the day when it's not something that's seen as like something that you're supposed to do and it's great. Because I love the fact that we're all different. Just the things that we're all beautiful in our own ways. And when people try to make another person that looks any kind of way different than them, I deeply get offended by that. I feel a lot.
So I think the thing that makes us human is the fact that we have the ability to form long-term alliances and coalitions. The thing that makes us human is that we can decide that it's more beneficial to work with our fellow people and our fellow creature on this planet. That applies to anything. Humans learn to domesticate dogs. We've domesticated horses, domesticated cats. There are domesticated lizards now. Like the ability for humans to adjust to the life around them and work with it is what makes us human. And to exhibit blatantly racist or xenophobic, transphobic, biphobic, LGBTQ, any of those behaviors, to exhibit that is to say, these people are less human than I and deserve less respect. And if you don't learn to unwrite those behaviors, I didn't understand transgenderism for a long time. I grew up in a mostly Black school, and Black culture is vehemently like anti like homophobic or homosexual. Like seeing people like tear apart the gay community from within our schools when we just had a class about slavery. It's like, how can you take your anger and allow yourself to oppress somebody who feels the same way as you, and in some cases people who have the same skin color as you, just because they love somebody differently or they identify themselves differently. You have to accept that we are here to work together to be more than we think we are, and that's what people are having trouble waking up to.
I can't help but have optimism, though, especially considering the hardships that we as a nation have went through this year, that if we utilize the common grounds that we have and throw political parties and even race for a second out the window, just go back to the core of humanity and start there. Maybe it's easier for people who are against their own actual interests to understand that they're going against their own interests. I don't know. These are the things I think of like day in and day out, you know, just as far as hope for the human race. We've had so many fucking comments, dude. This is awesome. Lisa said, white men in my borough keep proclaiming there is no racism here, because there aren't any police reports or the people of color he knows don't tell him about it. See, when I hear that, I think automatically of isolationism and how so many more whites, like over the past 20 years, have been moving to the exurbs or separating themselves even more. Like we're more segregated than we ever have been statistically when it comes to just white and then everyone else. And it just truly saddens me because I honestly love white people that love me. I love everyone. So it kind of like it hurts for me. Like I just don't understand how people can come to a place, disrupt, destroy, take what they want, and then continue to separate and cut themselves off from all people going forward. Like I don't understand that logic, and I think that's part of the, I don't mean to offend anyone, I feel like it's part of the self-sabotage that we're talking about, and like we see with a lot of Trumpers that are just blindly following him. I'm not talking about like educated Trumpers or Trumpers that actually have reasons for why they like him, but Trumpers that just blindly follow him and don't really have a justification as to why. It really saddens me, kind of like seeing zombies all around.
Yeah. The idea that people have their heads in the sand still. We talk about white privilege all the time. That's what it means, right? I made a post the other day that if you can write this like 4-page long report about election fraud, but you can't comment on like systemic racism because you don't think it's real, there's something very wrong and you're missing something very big. Again, they don't understand that the idea of systemic racism is that they're immune to it and it's perpetuated against people who aren't of their race. It's a token of white privilege to be able to say our system isn't racist, because it's thinking I've never personally been racist, so why would anyone else be racist? Why would a cop be racist, or a school teacher, or a doctor? Like, why would any of these people ever be racist? And you don't realize no one intends to be. No one will outright say that they are racist. No one's going to do that, especially now with how big of a buzzword that it's become. But the thing is to maintain use of that word and encourage people to, like, if someone says, oh, I'm not racist, okay, well, have you done the internal work to become anti-racist? Because that's the important part. Because racism isn't just a side topic. It's a major thing in people's lives.
I like to ask people, how do you know you're not racist?
I don't even know how you can actually answer that.
Exactly. But I look for their response, because I have now found a few people that go, well, yeah, we all are. That touches me, And so it lets me know that there are some people that are picking this up and understanding. And then if they go, I have a black cousin or, something, so I will attest to the fact that there are some that are understanding, and that does make me feel a little better that we are changing things little bit by bit.
There's plenty of room to say that we're making changes and having conversations we otherwise wouldn't be having. I remember like hearing people say things like, why does it have to be about race? When I was in middle school, I remember hearing that. But my middle school was like, my entire experience with school was strange, as I've explained on just a few other occasions. Being biracial and assimilated and tokenized, I was the biracial black kid that wasn't actually black by any stretch. I listened to white music. I had a white family. My mom is white. My brother's white. My sister from my mom she's biracial as well. So hearing people say things like, well, what does race have to do with it? You don't really think it does have anything to do with it. Like, oh, well, I'm I'm black, I'm fine. Everyone treats me well. They just treat you guys wrong because you're misbehaving. You don't realize that this is all internalized racism. It's not about anybody misbehaving. It's about the fact that people like me go into the system and then get assimilated, and we're congratulated for speaking well or carrying ourselves better than the rest of them or being one of the good ones. And people don't realize that. But race is everywhere. It's in everything. It's in every aspect of life. And saying that it doesn't exist or that there is just one race, it's to pretend we're at a finish line we haven't reached yet at all.
I can't imagine for someone that is consistently trying to keep up with that facade, and in constant denial, how they feel when that whole wall comes shattering down. I just really wonder how it feels for them. Is it a relief? Is it like debilitating? Because I mean, we've seen people that have been, KKK members and whatnot that have did a whole 360, right? But I don't really hear them talk about like their mental process and like how it makes them feel going from one to the other. And that's where my thoughts are on that. Like, just things I think about.
I can feel that. The position I was in, it's just a lot of like guilt and a drive to make up for it. Because I said a lot of really out of pocket shit back then too. There were a lot of places for me mentally where it was like, it's better to be like the Uncle Tom and be respected by white people and be uplifted by white people than to hold on to any semblance of blackness, because why would you bother to carry it, right? It's, you don't realize the damage that you do. Like for a long time, I didn't even want to reach out to my dad's kids because I didn't think that I would be black enough for them. Like these are the feelings that I had. And like biracial people are a marginalized population as it is, because one of the problems we deal with is finding an appropriate place, not just in the world, but within ourselves, like feeling weird going from one kind of music to another and thinking that that's a reflection of my character when it's not. That alone has nothing, it has no bearing. The behaviors that I used to exhibit, they have no bearing on who I am today if I've done the work and like the self-actualization to overcome it. To think no black boy or man or woman or child will ever feel belittled for their blackness because of me ever again. To think that will never happen. To think that I will never belittle anyone from the Asian American community. Like these are what it means to be like anti-racist, to have conversations with those people and try to figure out where the holes in each other are, as far as our history and the trauma, and take care of that on other people. Take care of the wounds that other people haven't had the chance to heal, and make sure you're not doing your damnedest to tear it open further when you don't, there's no reason to do that ever.
I completely agree with you. Man, someone said something on, Kendell speaks with such poise and is truly great at articulating thoughts. I've learned a lot from him in the last few months.
Thanks, guys.
And I can attest to that. Like, just seeing you from afar, like we don't speak every day or anything like that, but I keep up with you, and it's nice to look around me and still see people walking with me. We're not doing the same things in the same ways, but we know we're out there. Yeah, it's extremely powerful, encouraging, heartwarming, and motivating. And it's awesome to know. Teddy says, "I feel you, Kendell." Devin says, "I was also raised by two racist parents, so it pisses me off when people use the excuse, 'I was raised that way.' Change your thinking and actions to become a better person. Don't make excuses for your ignorance." Mm-hmm.
That's a good one. I like that.
Yeah. Megan says, "Knowing him for as long as I have learned so much from him. I'm super grateful to have him in my life." And Victoria is another amazing person. She's from Central PA. She said, "You are amazing." Someone else said, great speaker. You're a breath of fresh air. Yes. Lisa said, my daughter is Asian. I am blessed. She sees inspiring young activists walking their walk to make this a just world. And personally, that is one of the biggest reasons why I feel the need to be out here personally, is that I don't have kids yet. I want kids, and I want to bring them up in a world that I can either be proud of or say that I had a hand in trying to change. But also seeing so many youngsters put their fists up. And for example, when I saw Walter Wallace's kids stand up at the podium when they did the press conference, that was something that really reminded me of who's watching us. Time doesn't stop moving, and so the opportunity for growth does not either. And we're in a climate where there's so much being thrown at us every day, social media and news, and the climate. We really don't have the time to fall and not get back up. We can rest. There's time for self-care that is much needed, but there's always the need to remember that there were those before us who sacrificed for where we are, and we have to kind of carry that torch. At least that's the way that I view it.
Have you ever seen the Mr. T quote where he's on a talk show? I forget who it was, but he has all of his chains around his neck and like on his wrists, and the host like asks him if they ever get heavy, and then he goes on like a rant, and it pretty much concludes with, "Do you think they ever asked my ancestors if their chains were heavy?" And it's like, when you recognize that that's the way you need to look at it. Like I said, I've dealt with like mental health for a long time, but one of the things that gets me through any like suicidal phase or any depressive phase is remembering that I haven't gone through a fraction of like potentially what my ancestors went through. As far as direct threats, sure, I've had like a racist asshole like swing on me or grab at my items, but I haven't had someone lift a cross up out back of my like apartment complex and light it up on fire. I haven't had someone string me up from a tree, God forbid. Like these things, like I am not my ancestors, but it's because the trials and tribulations they dealt with were so much harder. And I would never stand to disrespect their journeys by saying I'm not my ancestors and meaning it in some chest puffing kind of way. I'm not that. I don't want to have to be.
I am my ancestors, because everything that they went through makes us who we are. And keeping mindful of the stripes that they went through will not go in vain. And being mindful of the sacrifices that they made and endured for us to have what we have, and the opportunity to continue to fight for more change and equality and equity. I see them. I'm not them, but I also am going to hold myself to the same regard, because later down the road, our offspring may hold us to the same regard.
We are.
We don't. Just they already are. Right. We don't see ourselves as those people, but keep in mind that like 30, 40 years from now, people may see us as the John Lewises of our day. And mental health issues are not, we're still breathing. And there are activists, there are powerful presidents and political prisoners that have either been silenced by means of execution or many other forms. And again, we're still here. It's oh man, you're gonna make me cry, man.
Yeah.
Megan said, "You are your ancestors' wildest dream."
I love seeing the one picture floating around of that. I think it's a collection of Black students that I forget if they were graduating or celebrating in something that was like an old plantation cabin.
Mm.
And they took a picture there, and it said like, we are our ancestors' wildest dreams, because they had come together after getting, I think they were all graduating to become doctors, I'm pretty sure, something like that.
Oh,
And
that sounds so familiar.
it, I forget exactly where I saw it. It was probably like another Facebook meme. But seeing stuff like that, it's a reminder of like how far we have come.
Oh yes.
So there's no reason to stop now, even if we do get tired or hungry or sad or cold. Like, we have to keep going, so the next person won't be.
The way I see it is like we've been chugging up this hill, right, in a cart, and we've been pushing it with our own brute strength. And now we've gotten to that curb at the top of the hill. We've got all this momentum. There's no way that we're going to be able to stop. That's the way that I see it. I just think the way that the trajectory of this year has gone, it's kind of it's something that we've excuse me, ingrained in our, we can't help it anymore. Like, I sleep, eat, breathe this. And so I can't, there's no going back. There's no stopping or ignoring it. These problems haven't gone away. They're not going away. So yeah, as Victoria says, the march continues. And the march is, for me, metaphorical. Like, we may not be on the streets, but we may be on Zoom. You know, we may be in homeless shelters providing food. We may be making sure that policies are getting thrown away that are causing harm to homeless people, and so on and so forth. There are a number of things that can be done, that need to be done, and that a lot of people should be reminded of, I would say. That's still out there.
Can we get rid of anti-homeless architecture first? Like spiked benches? Like, why?
Amen.
Why do we hate poor people instead of poverty itself? Like,
right.
I don't. It shouldn't be possible for someone to be homeless right now. It shouldn't be possible for someone in the Western world to die of starvation. There should be no possibility someone dies of a preventable disease. Like, none of it should be happening.
Agreed.
And people always say, like, well, what are you going to do? Like, how are you going to get the rich to put their money back into the system? You can't just tax them. It's like, well, let me tell you something. We might be able to, and that's probably the way to do it. I'm a big proponent for like a progressive wealth tax. If you make like $10 million a year, like, you don't need to be making $11 million a year when your workers are still being subsidized by people paying food stamps or paying into food stamps. Like, how do you give yourself a triple raise as a CEO of like McDonald's and then convince your workers that raising their wages will raise prices to the point where like people can't afford it anymore? Like, that's not happening. People are convinced that it's okay to have to work 70 hours a week just to put food on the table, and you're supposed to build a life with that and raise no, like that's people matter at the very core. Like, the prime intersectionality that we all have is that everybody eats, everybody sleeps, everybody needs a home, and everybody fucking dies. What people are we going to be when we die? Who are we going to be when we are on our deathbed? And we have to think, you know, I did like those homeless benches, but now I am not that big of a fan, because it's kind of an asshole thing to deny people a place to sleep because they can't afford a home. Like, you don't want to reach the end of your life having lived that way. You don't want it. It's not, no one deserves that.
The issue of the criminalization of homeless people is something that I lose sleep over, honestly, because I've been homeless a few times in my life, my partner as well. And
congratulations on flipping that, first off.
yeah, thank you. No one's ever said that to me before. But I thank you actually for highlighting that as well, because not everyone is as lucky as us. There are many people that have not had friends and family and resources and people to help them stay motivated and lift them up. Not everyone has had jobs. I still was lucky enough at one point when I was homeless to have a car, and both times when I was homeless, I still had a job. So there are other people who are not afforded those opportunities, and it breaks my heart. It's something that, like you said, it should be, can we make that the first and foremost issue, is working on aggressive architecture, and just criminalization of homelessness to begin with. Why, like,
decriminalize people needing help, period. Again, like going back to like drug addicts. Like drug addicts aren't people that are doing damage to society. They're people who are doing damage to themselves inadvertently and damage to their families by mistake. No, and that what people don't talk about enough is that addiction isn't just drugs. We don't criminalize people for like having eating disorders that lead to them gaining excessive amounts of weight. We don't criminalize these things because they're not criminal. We shouldn't criminalize people for drug addiction. We don't even talk about sex addiction.
Right.
We don't talk enough about alcohol addiction. Like, how is alcohol not considered more of a problem than marijuana? What, like, these are
millions of people.
We haven't had. We haven't put nearly enough water into these talks. And what people don't realize is that these aren't racial issues. These aren't issues of sexuality. These are issues of, at the very core, humanity itself. These are issues that would uplift all lives for real. And I say all the time, like, if all lives matter, help us prove it. And that's what we need to be doing, is having conversations beyond racial issues, because people don't realize police brutality, yes, it is a racist issue primarily. But behind that is another issue, and that's humans having power over others and being willing and capable of abusing it.
I like to point out to the fact that, like, race and class and capitalism are so intertwined in America that there really is no way to differentiate, but race isn't the biggest problem. We just happen to have this construct of race that's intertwined in it. But exactly what you said, it is people controlling other people, and the greed and the gluttonous actions that come with that I think is the bigger problem. And probably the way to root out all of the other problems. Yeah,
absolutely. It's working from the roots and building your way up. The one of the issues I had with Corey Klopp, the guy that I had that discussion with,
yes,
2 months ago now, I realized my issue with that was that I didn't really have the preparation or the answer for this happens to other people too, because I don't disagree. Like, my mentality is like, yes, it does happen to other people too, so it should be more than a race issue. And I think when you're talking with, I don't want to say like white fragility, but it's the easiest way to determine that, like that diagnosis in this conversation. When you're dealing with people who have that sense of white fragility to them, making an issue a race issue when they fear the same thing as well, it makes it much more abrasive for them. It makes it a harder to swallow pill. Because now you're telling them, like, okay, well, homelessness disproportionately affects Black people, please help. And they're just like, well, I'm at risk too. And it's like, what do you do past that point? Because they're not, if they're not wrong, it's like, well, it might not happen to you, but it happened, like, bad things happen to poor white people all the time. And that's the primary reason minorities are so affected, is because we have a tendency to fall into the poorer side of society because of how things have been built by us for white people. So I guess where I would remedy that is recognizing that the core issues are more important as a whole than dealing with issues individually on like a level of race. But we have to recognize uplifting our own communities. Like, that has to be a thing.
Real quick, Devin is asking about white fragility. Would you like to explain?
So the way I understand it is that white fragility is the idea that when you bring race into a topic, and you're talking to just a white person in general, when you're trying to talk about race with them, there's a historic blaze against white people that's coming to light now because historically white people have been imperialistic, hyper capitalist to the point of harming people and creating homelessness and deaths to preventable disease. So there's a level of, I don't want to be responsible for that, so I'm going to get really upset that this topic is going in this direction because it's not my fault as an individual white person. But what they don't understand is that it's not the white person that's the bad thing. It's what it means to be white and how we understand whiteness. That's the bad thing. Because whiteness is a level of purity or absence of color that has made you somehow superior or more worthy of God's America.
Right. Good example. I like to touch on, I usually just say to people something you actually just said. What does it mean to be white? And I just kind of leave it at that, because I think that's something that challenges them to actually sit there and think about it, because a lot of white people, I think, never really have been faced with that question to ask themselves that. And I think that touches at the root of the sting of white fragility and why they may have that response. And when you ask them that, they I think it kind of breaks down that wall in a sense. Go ahead.
So I think it can, but the issue is that beneath the wall is the idea that they're mediocre or inadequate despite having the privilege of being white. I'd be pissed if I had my current life circumstance and I was just like pure white. I'd be pissed. Like, damn.
Right.
Like life just looks like this. Like, the idea that there are entire groups of people who are oppressed not because of me, but because of those standing behind me under the same white flag. I don't want responsibility for that. I didn't do it. Like you don't accept that. So behind the wall is that soft, like fleshy core that's at risk as much as we are in their minds. When the socialists come to take their guns, or when someone ties them down to shove a vaccine in their arm, they're the same level. Or hell, to wear a piece of cloth over your face is like, these are all large problems to these groups of people. And I think it needs to be separated from race in a way. Like we have to separate whiteness from the conversation of race.
So when you were talking to Corey, do you think that you may have found a way to get through to him by doing that, or do you think it was just like
no? Oh, God. You want to talk about it all? That was a test that I don't think I was actually ready for. In my mind, I had it set like, okay, so everyone has a basic level of potential to understand things. So I'll explain things as simply as possible. And this came to the point where I was trying to explain to Tony, I think her name is, his wife. I forget if it's Tony or Tori. I brought up the example that Asian Americans will have to deal with COVID-based racism or COVID-based discrimination as a result of being Asian American or looking Chinese. So I mentioned this, and he's like, well, what does that have to do with? And it's like, it's just the example of something you as a white man don't have to deal with that an Asian American will have to deal with. And I don't think they like analogies. They don't like figures of speech. They don't like flowery or pretty language at all. You have to be very straight to the point. But when you're talking to people that are so willfully distant from absorbing or consuming the point, it really is almost a waste of energy, aside from the entertainment factor and then the igniting your people against those kinds of mentalities and ideals.
Agreed. He had started off asking me politely to, you know, have a discussion with him. And I'm like, yeah, sure. But, you know, I'm so busy, and I kept him in mind, and he just kept hackling me. And before I knew it, you're starting on with a thing with him, and I'm like, yo, I gotta tune into this. And then seeing like how he was just not, look, a little inside information is like, I get why he has the viewpoints he does, based off of talking with people that have grown up with him in the area. So hearing the conversation between you two, not that I sympathize completely with him, but I do understand why he has the thinking and ideas that he does. So it wasn't upsetting to watch. For me personally, it was a little more comical and a learning experience, because at that point in time, I personally was being hackled with a lot of different races from all over the world. He just happened to be someone that actually did bring up good points that we could talk about and discuss. But when I saw him and his partner speaking with you, it didn't seem like they were on that basis anymore. They, like, I don't know what they were trying to do.
It didn't feel that way.
Right. I honestly, I thought it was going to be some kind of, you know, a nice back and forth, but it was a dud. But it was definitely a learning experience, from my eyes, seeing that some people purposely act a certain way and you're not going to get through to them, so don't go down that road.
Did you see the end of that live?
What's that?
Did you see the end of that live? Like,
no, I didn't get to the end.
So the way the discussion ended up going, this was, I hung up. I just quit. I was like, I'm sorry, like, I'm done with this. I mentioned, like, there are things that are happening to Black people because of the color of their skin. And his wife said, someone's probably going to finish this in the comments before I actually spit it out. But when she said, is it because of the color of their skin or because of how they act? When we were talking about Breonna Taylor, Tamir Rice, Sandra Bland, Trayvon Martin, Eric Garner, Alton Sterling, like, we're talking about people who weren't threats to the police or the individuals who killed them.
Mm-hmm.
Or like when they would say, like, that's just one example, or it's just 7 examples, or it's just 12 examples. How many examples do you need of something being broken before you understand that it's fucking broken? Exactly. And they never picked up that. And her line of, is it because of the color of their skin or how they act? That was like, that underlined the discussion for me. Yeah. Because everything was coming from that pretense for them.
Yep.
All of it.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Damn. I mean, it's definitely a lesson learned, you know. Unfortunately, there are a lot of folks that it hurts, because I want everyone to be okay, get along. And one can wish and dream, but I'm also not going to live in a fantasy world. I'm going to live in reality and do my best to continue to make iced tea out of lemons.
Half and half, you know, so it might work out.
I just have a couple more questions for you before we get off of here, wrap up. We got like 10 minutes.
I'm cool with a little overtime if you guys are. Awesome. So don't feel pressed.
Awesome sauce. Philly. Philly's like is my favorite place in the world. And it means a lot to me. It has a lot of symbolism for me. Not only just for myself personally or my family, my ancestry, but the nation and what it means for the nation. Being a part of history, you know, I just want to know, what does Philadelphia mean to you?
So this kind of doubles back to like what I mentioned earlier when I said like generally like feelings of like nationalism or like pride for your home, like it usually does unsettle me. But to see Philly and cities like it capable of sweeping the results of an election the way Philly did. Like again, Philadelphia alone, along with like Delco and like 2 other counties here in Pennsylvania, are responsible for flipping the entirety of the election, like pushing it over the edge, really.
Mhm.
When we were on our way to the last Chester March, it was Philly that was the last thing reported that put Philly or PA into blue and gave us the final answer as far as what we had. So to me, Philly represents the idea that America was founded on, and it makes sense that it's the city that like birthed our country. Um, Unity against greed, unity against tyranny, unity against fascism, unity above all things. When someone threatens your home, your city, your people, bad things happen to you. Bad things do happen to Philadelphia, but only if you're a bad person or only if you're an unlucky good person that was wrong place, wrong time. Philly is a beautiful city, whether or not we like it all the time. It's a beautiful city, whether or not we like all the people.
Mhm.
And it's a beautiful city that has done its damned work to play its role in one of the most tumultuous times in American history. So I guess it's a little wordy, but
No, that is well
Philly is a
said.
picture of what we need to be as a country, willing to fix our shit and get together if it means making the world a better place.
Mhm. And that's something to be said also because 2 weeks prior, our city was in turmoil, and having different viewpoints concerning, the topics of police brutality and how police should handle mental health. And even though that has not been resolved, and we will definitely get back to that, it's nice to know, and we've always known this, that Philly can fight amongst each other, but if anybody comes at us, we stand together and we come at and that should be something that should be said for the rest of America. That Philly can set an example for the rest of America. And I feel like in ways it always has. Philly's a microcosm of not only PA, but the rest of the world. Excuse me, the rest of the country. You look at Philadelphia police's history of police brutality, and it's very storied.
Oh yeah.
Um, it goes without saying that the rest of the country, especially the Northeast and the North, the Rust Belt, all has dealt with places that traditionally were integrated, still dealt with these issues as a means to keep people of color under control. And obviously, the only difference now is that we have cameras and we can photograph and all of that. But the storied history of Philadelphia's police departments, police brutality, definitely speaks to the rest of the country. And having it happen again with a mental health issue, actually twice in the state of Pennsylvania within 2 months, right directly before an election, and then have quote unquote riots, whatever, protests and whatnot, to me shows that amongst turmoil, being thrown with all kinds of sideballs like the pandemic and all kinds of different forms of voter suppression, Philadelphia still persevered. And it's something to be said. And this has nothing to do with party affiliations, because people, whatever party you're affiliated with, people came out to vote in general. They
Mm-hmm.
came out. So this was an election that stoked people's fire, no matter what side of the aisle they were on. And that's something to be said too, especially with Philadelphia. Philadelphia is predominantly Black, but it also has a storied history of racism. And so, just like any other major city, but with Philadelphia, it's very storied, like New York, like Chicago, like Detroit. And what the world has witnessed in Philadelphia the past 2-3 weeks should wake the world up to what America is like in general. The hypocrisy of it, the beauty of it in its entirety, the beauty of it, really, has a lot to say about not only the spirit of us Philadelphians or Pennsylvanians, but as Americans as well, and people of color specifically. People can look at the images of the looting or whatever and latch onto that because that's what the media pushed out. But I was on the streets. I personally saw a lot of, I've never seen such camaraderie and a communal feeling between so many people of color all at once. It's just something that I don't like. Even though it was like chaos going on, I can say that I was there during a piece of history that some people may perceive as bad because of the images they were fed. But being on the ground, I saw nothing but images of emotion. And a lot of it was love, pain, grieving, but the whole thing was something that I will never forget, and I wouldn't change for the world. I'm glad I was there. I was there for actually about a week, but the initial like protests and riots and stuff, I was there amongst it all. And what the media will put out and what I actually saw were clearly two different things. But I will say I learned a lot as far as not judging my people ever again. We know, you and I know, that crime comes from poverty. So I'm not judging someone that feels the need to do what they need to do to survive. But I've never felt this feeling of seeing, you know, if I see a homeless person, I give them money. You know, I give them food. If they ask me to get them money so they can go get weed or shoot up, I would. And people can ask me why, and I'll explain. But seeing people looting to get diapers or bleach or rice, I no longer have anything bad to say on that topic. And it really showed me that no longer again will I judge not just my people, but anyone's people for why they do what they do. I'm going to just try and understand. And if I disagree, I disagree. But I'm going to do my best to not prejudge. That was a huge learning experience, Kendell. Like, you know, the things that I experienced that day at the Really rally was one thing, but this was like, with my own people, affected me a million times more. Because you look around, you know, history is my thing. So like, I've been familiar with the history of West Philly in general, and to look around me and see things, feel the air, feel the desperation of people, grieving, you know, not ever again will I judge, you know, why someone feels the need to steal, because what I see is capitalism's effects on our society.
That
was a lot.
No, you're good. So we always talk about, or we always hear about the dangers of socialism and communism. But what I think has happened is that we have effectively vilified the idea that any system beyond capitalism has merit or capability as far as serving people goes. Capitalism is a wonderful thing as far as being able to create your own position in life and build whatever empire it is you want to stand on.
Right.
But it's become far too easy for the people at the top of a capitalistic society to build their empire using the blood, sweat, and tears of others. Um, my idea has been for a very long time that we should have a near unlimited ceiling for as far as what people are capable of earning, but we have to change our definition of earning.
Right.
Someone who is a CEO managing a chain of superstores that are all pretty much automated and running under the care of individual store managers and district managers, the people at the bottom of that system should not be the ones that are the worst off. The people scanning groceries should be some of the like most powerful people like vocally in society as far as what they can do with their wealth and mobility. If you feed the population, you should be hailed the way our military is. Um,
Agreed.
you can go to a supermarket and find plenty of people who have never been forced to murder a child overseas for oil, but we don't even talk about like the labors that don't get recognition on Labor Day. We don't talk about people working in grocery stores or fast food lines. We don't talk about barmaidens in restaurants. Like we treat these people, the people in bars, we treat them like wenches. Um,
Very cool.
you're treated like less than human in any of these fields, and you're one of arguably the most important roles in society that has to be filled no matter what, but it's more beneficial to be the person to have started it than one of the people perpetuating it.
Yeah.
And it needs to change. It's why the minimum wage needs to change. It's why there should be a I don't know if the answer would be an income cap, or if it would be a gap, or limited by, say you make 5,000 times more than your lowest employee. That shouldn't be legal. If your
Agreed.
lowest employees are down there, like that shouldn't be okay. It shouldn't be.
Yeah, no, I don't have a problem with people having some sort of excess of money, but I think that when you, like what you said, if you're making up to a certain point of more than what your uh, workers are making, it should be a cap, or an increase of what they make to close that gap. So everyone in your specific company is making more. I'm okay with that as long as the workers in your grocery store, for example, are making a significant amount closer to what you're making. I'm okay with that. But when you're like Jeff Bezos making trillions of dollars and his workers are busting their behinds and risking getting COVID to do what? Because he's not going to live his life spending all of this money. What purpose does that serve when that money could be very well spent helping other people live productive lives?
Yep.
That's an awesome idea.
People point to Amazon as like one of the golden companies of capitalism in the West, but we don't understand how many like ethics violations and hard conversations need to be had about the working conditions at Amazon, which seems to be set back to like pre-Labor Day standards. According to like the reports of people saying that like they're passing out on the job, you have
Yeah.
people like wearing diapers on the warehouse floor. Like why can you be the dragon in the cave hoarding all this gold when the people in the village are starving?
Think about their truck drivers. Like that freaks me out because it's dangerous and they don't get as much sleep as they should anyway. And statistically, Amazon drivers get even more less sleep than other truck drivers. And they're busier. The amount of I just go straight to accidents when it comes to that. But yeah, it's basically, and not even just with Amazon in general, but we're all being overworked to the point of damn near slavery. It is slavery, but we're also we're being distracted from really sounding the alarm on our own bodies as to why we're feeling the way that we're feeling all the time and why we're having all these issues. That's a big part of it. I feel like those are the side effects of capitalism, if you will. Because I do see some pros to it, but where we are now, like what you're pointing out, is there needs to be some tweaks and some caps and some regulations that we have skirted by years and years and years getting the shitty end of the stick on. But we've never really spoken up as a group of people. We've had a few people speak for us and they just get silenced or they don't get listened to. But I think the thing that we haven't really tried is uniting on a big scale and forcing these people to make these changes either.
So I'm glad you mentioned the truck drivers, because I was a big Andrew Yang guy when he was in the running.
Me too.
First, but Andrew Yang was a very good close second. And the entire platform revolves around the idea that things like trucking is going to become obsolete. There's going to be no reason at all to have a human behind the wheel of a truck, because you're going to have an entire network of vehicles that are all communicating via Bluetooth or whatever evolution comes from that.
Right.
So we don't even see car accidents on the road anymore. Like, humanity can get to those points, but what happens to the truck drivers? We don't have that answer right now. We don't have systems in place to protect people from losing their work losing their work and their income as a result of the system no longer working for them. Eventually, like, horse breeders start losing jobs because we create cars. Colored televisions will start to outpace black and white televisions. No one's going to mourn for the company creating like classic TVs. No one's going to mourn for that.
Right.
And this goes into things like climate change. We shouldn't be afraid of adapting to solar, wind, and nuclear energy. We shouldn't be afraid of these things. But we've held on to this idea that you are not worth anything unless you are working on anything. We've adapted to this. And if you're a coal miner and you lose your job, you no longer have the value of being a person, because you attached your entire identity to what you do for 40 to 60 hours a week. I don't give a shit about that 40 to 60 hours a week. I don't care who you are in that 30 hours that you're working or the 20 in a part-time job. You should be more than capable of living a dignified life, no matter what it is you're doing or no matter what it is you're being stripped of doing. If you have mental illnesses that prevent you from working, you shouldn't be stuck at like maybe $800 a month.
Right.
Like, give some like level of maneuverability to the people at the bottom of the barrel, and we won't have a bottom of the barrel anymore.
Right.
Our society will always be better than it was yesterday if we think about the need for compassion and kindness in policy, not just in individuals, but when we're writing policy and making decisions, everybody who will be suffering under the boot of that system needs to be considered before we start strapping them up.
When it comes to the Democratic Party, the factions have become clear.
Oh yeah.
Do you? Right. And I have my own bones to pick with the Democratic Party, but I'll leave them for another time. I want to ask you specifically, like, about people like the Squad, specifically AOC.
Hey.
Yes. Do you think that we have a chance to properly articulate this in a way that specifically other generations will get this, and not just act as if there are no disagreements within the Democratic Party, or that they don't know what progressivism is, because it's here.
Yeah.
You know?
We're very behind. Like, our Democratic Party is not a left party, like, by any stretch. The way the Democratic Party stands right now, aside from the Squad and other progressives like them that have similar ideas, like Bernie and Andrew and other people who are on these platforms with progressive ideas, we have a party that's really just Republicanism light. Like, it's not Trumpism, which is fortunate, but you're effectively we're drinking Diet Republican and thinking we should be congratulating ourselves for that, when there's, like, people say, like, you're going to get more conservative as you get older. And I've seen the meme where it's like, well, every year I've gotten older, I'm just sliding to the left. as I've gotten older and less angry, more compassionate, more caring, and more honest than I ever used to be, I've become so far left to this point where it's like I look at the Democratic Party and I'm like, y'all are still talking about a $15 minimum wage, and I'm thinking 20 now because of how behind we are. I'm
Yes.
thinking housing shouldn't be like, I think housing should have very hard caps on like affordability for it. Like, sure, if you're buying a mansion or a luxury house, it's $3 million. Fucking have at it. But if I'm just trying to move, like, say you, if I were like, if you consider how many people are one emergency away from catastrophic life changes, such as homelessness or death, disease, or just a broken family, like everyone is only a handful of emergencies away from that. Most people are less than one full emergency away from that. What the hell are we supposed to do when something that affects everybody, i.e., COVID, what are we supposed to do when something like that rips everyone away from the 40 hours a week that they identified with for a long time?
Exactly.
And our country's answer, and still for the past 7 to 8 months, our country's answer was $1,200 once, and then a $600 bonus to unemployment that didn't affect anybody that lost their job through the stress of dealing with COVID. Only if you like have a loved one who was actually suffering from it or at risk of it. And we don't have enough foundations in place to protect people when shit hits the fan. We're not ready for it. We weren't ready for it. But with our progressive forward thinking mentality, fuck left and right. This is about moving forward and lifting everybody. Like, these things need to be normalized and universalized, because housing and food and healthcare shouldn't be something you have to die for. It just shouldn't be that way anymore. We have far too much access to resources now. There's no reason anyone here should ever be starving, and then you have people going on mission trips to other countries when we have homeless people here.
Thank you. And not to discredit other people around the world, but a lot of change starts at home. You know?
Yeah, that's what it is.
Mm-hmm. See, it just, I was watching this documentary last night about the Marshall Islands and how climate change is affecting them one of the most, because they're an atoll nation. And so anywhere on their island, you're literally like yards away from the ocean. And so obviously they're getting like, they're going to be gone within like, I think it's 30 years if we don't reverse climate change. And people just tell them just to come to the US. They're like, this is our home. Like, why do we have to go somewhere else when we can just, you guys are thinking about it the wrong way. Like, how about we change our whole planet?
Solve the problem.
And right, the problem, instead of telling us to move somewhere else, because this problem is going to go to where the somewhere else is too, eventually. So it's the same thing that we're dealing with.
I feel the same way about people who say they want to leave the country after the election, for example. Say Donald Trump had won, and everybody every single leftist or progressive that could afford it left. What does that look like for everyone who can't leave?
Exactly.
Like,
exactly.
And imagine, like, Trump does get to the, or not Trump, because Trump isn't the problem. Trump is a symptom. Trumpism itself, which is just fascism now.
Yes.
What happens when we've run as far as we can and as long as we can, and they've grown global? What happens then when everyone who could fight or could have fought has chosen to leave instead?
Yeah. This is why this brings us back to education and skill trades and building our people up. All of the, because I think now, as of 2020, any person under, I think it's 10 or 12, is a person, like majority is a person of color. So within like the next 15, 20 years, the majority of the population under like the age of 18 or 30, whatever, will be predominantly black or brown. And if we don't change anything now, we'll have a minority that holds the money and the power all to themselves, which I mean, they kind of still do. But we have a chance to turn the tides. Education plays a part in it. Even building trades, skilled trades, so people know how to rebuild our whole infrastructure, and not just for people of color and immigrants, but America in general. Because our whole country, our whole system, not just our policies and our laws, but our infrastructure, our roads, our schools, the whole system is dilapidated and outdated. And we do have the potential to turn it around, especially like right now. But I think it does play a factor into like how we are perceiving it. Like we're still looking at things like throw the whole Trump denying climate change out the window, but just us as American society or us as first world society still look at it like it's a faraway problem, even though there's trash right outside our door. And so we're still not perceiving it. Like we have a lot of us that do realize this, but we as a society have not made the overall much needed changes to completely revamp things to the point of reversing things back up to no return, to where things are good, you know. I'm going to continue to be optimistic about it though. And if not, I'm just gonna run to the hills.
Then the hills.
No, seriously, like seriously, it's like it goes back into the whole thing with the movement in general. Like all these issues are intertwined, and we may solve one issue, but the other's still there, and the other is still there. Like I said, these things are intertwined, and I can't rest until things I know are progressively at least getting better in some way. Optimism and our voices are sometimes all we have. Yes.
How about?
And I think that's something that we have in common with our ancestors to hold on to, is that optimism, that faith, that general strength to continue to, I'm breathing, so I'm here today, so I'm going to continue to fight. And if I'm here tomorrow, I'm going to do the same thing. And what you touched on earlier about when it comes to mental health, just the small things, just doing something. My thing is, if I'm being stagnant is the worst thing you can do. Especially with depression, being stagnant is the worst thing you can do. So as long as you're continuing to make a move in some way, that is the best that I could ask for my fellow people. And it doesn't have to be to the full extent of, you know, a debate that we have with someone like Corey Klopp and them not taking it in, for example, but it can be just as small as sharing a post of someone's petition to get their friend out of prison that they were wrongly convicted of a crime that they did not commit. You know, it can be as small as giving your last dollar bill to a homeless man on the street because you can see how hungry they are.
Mm-hmm.
I think no matter how big or small, or wrong or right, it's all still important. It's all still just the same. It's all doing something. It's not doing nothing, you know?
So, like you said, it is the little things. But it's recognizing that solving all the little problems makes it so we can actually focus on the bigger problems. Climate change is not an issue that the normal person's going to deal with as far as interacting with solutions. Someone with a car isn't going to think about like driving 45 minutes to a recycling center to be sure they play their part that way. It's climate change. It's a bougie issue that you need money or policy in your favor to resolve.
That's
And
why it's so hard to get minorities on board with it. I mean, when you're dealing
absolutely.
with poverty and you're thinking about surviving, why the fuck would you want to give a fuck about trash on the street? And I get that, but I also get what you're saying too. Like,
Oh yeah, I'm like violently anti-littering, like violently anti-litter. Not actually violent. Please God, nobody clip that. But the idea of like having people delve into issues that they can't resolve or blaming people for these issues. No one in the ghetto should be blamed for climate change when there's a gigantic factory spitting fumes into the air just a few blocks away from them. Like that's not their fault. Like it's not the farmer's fault that cows fart, and cows are a big contributor to climate change. What needs to be resolved, like everybody needs to eat. Most people still do rely on meat as a large chunk of their diet. You can't get rid of these things. You can't tell someone again in the hood to go drive 45 minutes to their like nearest recycling facility when they're thinking about how they're putting bread on the table the next morning. So we do need to do the little things so we can focus on the bigger issues. You're not going to convince every homeless person on the planet to suddenly care about police brutality. It's not going to happen. So what the hell do? You appease that group, you figure out what they need and help them, cater to their needs. And then when they're up and they can actually, you can't see anything when you're down. So when they're actually up and they have eyes on the situation instead of eyes in their situation, then they can actually help to make changes and help to write legislation and have conversations that lead to change. And every homeless person brings a story to the table. I've come to the point where I need to ask them their names now. I can't just walk away from a homeless person. Or I've been doing this all night, but instead of saying it that way, I've tried to put people first. So it's not homeless people or mentally ill people. It's people who are homeless or people who are mentally ill. And that's the
I agree. I've been coming to terms with the same thing like a couple months ago. I was like, you know what? I find the calling someone a homeless person it's discouraging. And it just has a negative connotation to it. And I'm like, why don't we change that and flip it on its head, you know? People without shelter, people that currently don't have shelter, or, you know, like just flip it on its head and give these people the opportunity to have the mindset that this isn't permanent, you know? And when you say homeless person, it kind of, in my mind, makes it permanent for those people, you know, without even
identifying characteristic.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's a homeless guy I met the other day. Like, no, it's a guy that just happens to not have a house right now because of like shit hitting the fan.
Gay marriage.
Yeah. Shit, gay people getting kicked out of their homes and becoming homeless. Like intersectionality right there.
Yeah.
Like Megan said, like it's about the language you use. One tiny change in just putting like people at the front of your statement, that it dignifies everyone. It allows people to recognize, like, first and foremost, I am a fucking human, and there's nothing you can do to take that away.
Mm-hmm.
That's where we all need to stand on that same level of intersectionality, and that's where we need to solve human issues.
Mm-hmm. And what goes in with that is holding yourself and other people accountable. You know, when we're wrong and we have our biases, we admit them. And when someone else is wrong or has those biases, you don't have to be rude about it, but call them out on it and let them know politely, hey, I've learned that that's offensive and this is why. There's no harm in making someone aware of something and educating them on something that they weren't aware of. If they want to be dismissive of it, they can take it how they want, but at least it was put out into the universe. Yes, making people accountable is number one though, and it goes in hand with, I think, people really making sure that they're heard, but also making sure that you're heard yourself.
Mm-hmm. So when I look over, I'm just looking over at the comment section.
Right?
Yeah, I like feel bad. I'm just like, oh shoot, people are gonna see that I'm like looking away. It's like, no, I'm just reading the comments. Accountability is like it's the most important thing for any like forward moving conversation.
Right.
If you want to discuss anything from homelessness to drug addiction to race, what needs to be done is hold the people who don't deal with the problem directly, hold them accountable for being compassionate to those who do.
Yes.
If you're a white person, like feel free to stay out of conversations about race if you're like comfortable doing that, but never allow yourself to use your voice to overwrite the voice of a person of color talking about race. I've had a number of instances at smaller protests, or not smaller protests, smaller marches that I've either encountered just being in the city and trying to find something, but I've gotten up to the front of the group because I like to be where there's opposition, because that's where conversations happen that can change minds or change hearts or change people.
Yeah.
And I've had like a small white girl like leap in front of me and just start screaming in the faces of police officers who I'm like having a conversation with. And I'm like having a basic talk, like, you don't want to be here right now. We don't want to be here right now. Like, if you can have the conversation with us that you understand the system needs to change too, we'll be much faster on and then just interrupted by like little white girls screaming like, oh, fuck you, pigs. You're all like shit human. Like, oh my God, you're part of the problem, Karen. Like, that's like the most tiring thing to deal with. And the right mocks us for it all the time, like, oh yeah, go get another like liberal girl with colored hair to tell you like how to feel about your oppression. And it's like, I personally don't feel oppressed by my race. I don't. My life feels good. As far as like, again, this year, like it's been one of my best years for me personally, as far as like understanding myself financially, emotionally, socially, better than it's ever been. That doesn't mean I need to pretend there are black people who like don't experience these things. Like,
right.
There are plenty who do, and they're the ones that this is about. It's not necessarily about me, who is a black man effectively living under white privilege, because I still do live at home with my white family.
Right.
Not everyone has that luxury.
Right.
As far as explaining privilege to people, like I've been trying to say, like, okay, think about white privilege, compare it to sight privilege. You are born with the ability to see. You don't have the problems that blind people have. I consider that like there are things you can consider like black privileges. Like if I had any other hair, I wouldn't have the privilege of having this hair. And I've come to love the hair that I have now, despite years of being like teased for it or like being called like girly. And it's like I listen to the young boys about my hair more than I listen to the young girls. And man, do I want to slap 12-year-old me in the face for that. But we need to recognize that you can have unique problems that are the result of certain factors or circumstances of your birth. Going back to the idea of sight privilege, if you have an elevator that doesn't have a label that includes Braille on it, you have created an environment that is not safe or fostering or compassionate for your blind population. If you have use of all four of your limbs or your fingertips even, you have a privilege in that you could lose that at any minute. And there are people who have lost that already. So to think that being white in a system designed around white leadership and white rulers for its entire existence, to deny that you have the privilege of blending into that system seamlessly is to shove your head in the sand and pretend that there is no risk of you losing that privilege. You can experience things that are unique to being Asian or Black or Native American. Shit, you can experience things that are unique to being white. That's not a problem in and of itself. Shit, it's the most beautiful thing about having multiple races to begin with.
Yes.
When I hear people say, I don't see color, I choke. Like, why? Why don't you see color? Why do you think in a world full of rainbows it's better to be colorblind? Why do you believe that? How do you feel that way? And like sleep at night, and then you recognize whiteness is artificial. To exhibit whiteness, there's nothing to be proud of for being just white. If
Mhm.
you're Irish or German or English, like you have all of
Yes,
your historical,
yes.
like all your cultural background there. But whiteness was an answer to stop being racist against all these other groups. It was the answer to um, well, there are black people who are going to be better. There are going to be black men who are smarter or faster or stronger or more talented singers. It was the answer to that by saying, even if you're the worst of the white men, you're better than the best of the blacks.
Hmm.
That was the answer. That's where whiteness comes from. And whiteness itself, like I said earlier, is a toxic thing that we need to address because it shouldn't really exist. Blackness only exists because we don't all have the privilege of being able to afford an ancestry test or just learning about where we come from to begin with.
So
Whiteness is
true.
artificial. There's no forgetting like, oh well, I think I'm like Irish or something. It's like no, if your family holds pride in that, you're not going to forget that because they'll never stop reminding you.
Oh man, yo, like you have such an awesome mind. Like, and you have such a calm demeanor about yourself. So it makes like for me, it's just like I don't expect any of this. Like, I mean, I do because from the time I've met you, you've always been so articulate and passionate. But we've never had this kind of discussion. You know what I mean? Like, and so like this has been awesome. Like, I
I agree.
I'm
Absolutely.
so thankful for like joining me with this. Like, we have to do another one sometime.
I have no
For
problem with that. It is a nice, refreshing break away from the Corey Klops of the world.
oh my goodness, yes, yes. And it's nice to not even because I said we don't talk all the time. Like I consider you a friend, but we don't, you know what I mean? We're not close. And so it's nice to talk to someone that I'm not immediately close with to have these general talks about all kinds of things. You know what I mean? It's refreshing. And then also not to talk to an ignorant racist as well. um, yeah,
I want to do
but
that.
I'm gonna. No,
Need to do that one again. It was a bit of
I I definitely will because I owe you for that one. Because you definitely took that for me because I was all ready and then I came out and you came out of nowhere. I was like, I got this. I was like, okay, I'm gonna tune in, you know. But no, I owe you one on that one for real, for sure. I'm gonna get off of here. It's like 9:35,
We
so
said
we're
10
gonna wrap
minutes,
up.
40 minutes ago, if that makes you feel any better.
Was that?
I said you said 10 minutes, 40 minutes ago, if that makes you feel any better.
Nah, because the conversations just roll, man. They flow, and everyone appreciated it. It seemed like everyone really enjoyed the discussions we had, and really agreed and had a lot of people had input. So that meant a lot. That's what I was hoping for, was to get people tuned in and get them talking about this stuff. Whatever came to mind for us, not anything structured necessarily, but just really highlighting if these things are stuff that we are upset about or are thinking about, other people have got to be in the same boat, obviously. So that's what I really wanted to touch on with everyone else that watches. So man, thank you again. Thank you so much for tuning in. And thank you everyone else for watching.
Oh yeah,
Um,
big thanks on that one. It feels great seeing how many comments there actually are here.
yes,
And
yes, man.
there's some people who were here like when we started that are still here too. Shout out
Mm-hmm.
to those people. Like more of you.
Oh wow, yeah, people have been watching the whole time. That's awesome. Yo, thank you, man. I appreciate.
Absolutely.
Real quick, just give people a little bit of info about you, where you're from, what you do again.
Again, in closing, I am Kendell M Simmons. I'm going to start using my middle name eventually, don't worry. But I'm a guy who picked up a megaphone one day and decided like this was going to be something I enjoy doing because it makes me feel like I'm playing my part. Um, I got involved with this by calling out of work when I was already 30 minutes into my shift and then just getting a ride into the city and getting involved there. If you haven't gotten involved yet, like, don't feel bad about not protesting. Don't feel bad about not signing petitions.
Yeah.
Involve yourself just by uplifting someone Black that you know who has been tired from being on the front line. Put some energy into the white people who have overextended themselves to make our lives easier and to help us out when we are too tired to do the work. And remember that this isn't just about Black lives. BLM is about far more than that. And it's only a start for many of us. There's a lot of activism that needs to be done. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. And there are a lot of people who have yet to matter that we need to make matter.
Man, I just want to say you matter as well.
Thank you.
I appreciate you. And I know that there's a lot of people that look up to you. So thank you for joining us. Sammie's around. He's a little under the weather, so that's why it's just me. And then also on Wednesdays, he usually does another show called Straight Talk. So usually Wednesdays, I like to have either a guest join in or a co-host. So basically tonight, you've been the co-host, my brother. Yes, man.
Oh,
all right. So
pronouns. My pronouns very simple. He, him.
Yeah.
I'm nice and cis over here, guys. Cis.
Yes.
Oh, hey.
Yes, for sure.
There we go. There we go. Much better comment.
Yo, for real. This show is a lot of times we like to have disputes and discussions, but it also furthermore is to highlight the differences and show that we're not alone. You know, that's important.
Oh yeah.
So again, I want to thank you guys. I want to thank you most of all. We definitely got to set up another time to do something again. What do you think?
I don't work Wednesdays, Thursdays, or Saturdays like most of the time. There you go. Easy.
Awesome. Okay, well, I'll definitely be in touch with you, brother.
Of course. My DMs are always open. Shoot me a message anytime, and we will reschedule.
All right, brother. Well, you have a good night. And everybody else as well. Thank you for tuning in.
Bye, everybody. Love y'all. Peace.
Love y'all too. Bye-bye.